Before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to share that QCon London returns April 7 to 9, 2025. Learn what's next from world-class leaders pushing the boundaries. You'll learn actionable insights from senior software developers working on real-world projects across multiple domains. Learn more at qconlondon.com. Good day, folks. This is Shane Hastie for the InfoQ Engineering Culture Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Geoffrey Huck. Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much, Shane. I'm very happy to be here.
Now, you are a French person living in Germany. I'm talking to you from New Zealand, so the joys of the global communications. My normal starting place for this is, who's Jeff?
All right, so I started with a very deep passion in tech when I was a teenager, learned about everything, then became a software engineer. And I've been a software engineer for more than 12 years, 10 years as a freelancer. And nowadays, I help people in tech to speak in public. So it's not a coincidence. The reason why today I teach public speaking is because this was my biggest area of struggle. So in a nutshell, I learned how to speak and then realized that I can help my fellow tech people to learn those skills too.
There is the stereotypical software engineer who doesn't like standing up in front of other people, where we are, again, stereotypically introverted. And there's a reason for the stereotype. There is a tendency towards introversion in our profession. How does that sometimes get in the way?
Yeah, it actually quite often comes in the way. We are mostly introverts because learning about tech and becoming an expert, that requires hours and nights and weekends and holidays behind your computer. That was my case. I used to have a very, very small social life. So you don't get the skills that would make you great at communication because you spend so much time on the computer. I think that's the reason why introverts are selected when it comes to tech. And it comes in the way because whenever we start to build softwares in companies, individual contribution, it's valuable, of course, but it's not what's the most valuable. What's the most valuable is doing things as a team, because that's how you get something that is bigger than just one individual. And that's when lack of communication skills are magnified. Because if you can't leverage this way of doing things together, you will never reach as much impact as you could. The important thing to know is that being introvert, and in fact, the notion of introversion itself isn't as crystal clear as we think it is. There can be many differences between two introverts. They might have completely different skills and non-skills when it comes to social skills and communication. And it's completely contextual. You can behave like an introvert in one context, like work, and be completely extrovert with friends and family. Which means that introversion is more a habit than permanent trait. And in fact, if you study people over a long period of time, there are many people who completely change their personality over a lifetime. Though it has a tendency to stay the same because there is a kind of momentum. Once we have our way of doing it, we tend to do similarly in the future. But there are many people who change that. And I think that's very important to know.
And when we say communication skills, what do we actually mean?
Going to someone else and speak when you have something to say. instead of spending a lot of time by yourself to guess what the answers would be. Communication skills also mean that whenever you have a conflict, instead of ignoring it, you will go to the person, you will talk about it, hopefully in a way that is good for you and for the other person. Communication is also taking decisions as a group. It could also mean presenting in front of many people, talking in meetings, all those skills that requires talking to other people. So I'm not really talking about writing communication here because I'm more specialized in talking, but that would also have to be included.
We're often quite comfortable talking with our colleagues, the people like us who understand our language as technologists. How do we step into communicating with non-technical colleagues?
One of the reasons you can easily talk tech with your peers because you kind of know what they know. You know what they know, so it's very easy for you to adapt to their level of understanding. Many people in tech, they don't really know what non-tech people understand or not. Because if you want to know, you need to ask questions, you need to ask for feedback. Hey guys, is it okay if I use this terminology? Do you understand? Do you understand what it is? Or can you even give me a short description of what you understand given what I just said? In order to be effective communicators, we need to be able to assess what's the gap between our understanding and the other part understanding. It really starts with feedback. If there is no feedback, you might talk about something that the other think they understand or don't understand at all without even knowing it.
How do I get that feedback? How do I request that feedback?
Just ask. Just ask, but it's also important that you ask the right questions. If you're talking to a business owner about technical issue, the first step would be to go there and talk about the issue and why it happens and why the tech suddenly went wrong. But most of the time, what the business owner wants to hear is just the business impact. How long can we fix it? Can we avoid it in the future? But of course, if you're not sure about what the business owner wants to know, you try your best bet. You tell something, and then you ask, do you have enough information to take a decision? Do you think that I told you things that you don't need to know? Did you understand what I meant? Do you have questions? Well, you can be very natural about it. Of course, you could follow a set of questions. But in my experience, it's always better to first try with just what comes to you without applying a certain method so that you can have this feeling of, oh yeah, okay, this works, this doesn't work. You internalize the knowledge instead of you just using a framework. And if you do it this way, you will have a lot more success at adapting to the other person.
So if I have technical information to convey to a group of non-technical people, how do I communicate that in a way that does support that understanding?
You really need to know what they care about. Usually tech allows you to do something. So talking about what it does is always a good bet. What it does, what problem it solves, what it makes possible, could also be the shortcomings of this tech. It has a low performance, or it's slow, or it's expensive, takes a long time to set up. Everything that is related to business is always something that's valuable to people because that's what they use. So whenever it comes to time, when it comes to money, when it comes to problems that you solve, those are always good bets. Now, if you really want to talk about how the tech works, make sure that people really want to know. And if they do, your best bet would be to use analogies, metaphors. Try to find a story that explains the main concepts in a simple way. And here, a rule of thumb is to talk as if you're talking to young children.
I'd argue that with the pervasiveness of technology today, isn't it incumbent upon everyone to be able to talk about what the technologies are?
It's not always simple for people who are in tech to talk simply about technology. Because talking simply about tech is kind of a different language than talking about what tech really is if you look behind it. It's almost two different languages. And if you never use the simple language to explain your knowledge, you don't make the connections in your brain that enable you to explain it. It's really step by step. You need to practice to talk to people who don't understand in order to be able to understand it better. Of course, you can also write articles about it. That's usually a great way to be able to explain things in a simpler way. If you're not sure that you can talk about some concept or some technology, write an article that makes it available for the general public.
How do I keep people engaged when having these conversations?
What works well to keep people engaged is usually to change the rhythm. So this is more for a setting when you speak to a crowd. If you sound like a documentation, it will be boring and then it will be hard to follow. But if you sometimes you drop a number, then you tell a story, then you ask a question to the audience. You change the rhythm often, you will keep the attention longer. But of course, this doesn't replace a good delivery. Talking clearly, talking with intonations, talking with a certain amount of passion. This is something that gets attention easily. And it's something that you can train yourself to do.
How do I train myself?
Or the best is the camera. You record yourself and then you look at it. And if when you look at it, you feel that the person who's talking on the camera is natural, then you're probably there. How you can proceed in practice is to take 2 minutes every day, doing a short record, choose a topic you want to speak about, look at the camera and speak for 2 minutes. And try to be a bit more expressive than usually. Try to be a bit more energetic, talk a bit louder, use intonations with your voice. Of course, it will be hard the first few days, but if you do it days after days, you will see that your delivery will improve a lot.
Another thing that we're often accused of, or maybe not accused, but we're often, again, stereotyped, is struggling to connect with other people, particularly in social situations, organization social situations. How do we get comfortable?
It's very interesting that you ask me how to be comfortable, because that's really key here. Many people who are not very comfortable, who identify as introverts, when they go to a networking event, they go out there to meet people, they face a big emotional reaction. And then they go there, they have this big emotional reaction, and they try to apply techniques that they read to be effective networkers. But that's a completely different game. It's the same in networking, it's the same in public speaking. It's actually the same in all kinds of social situations. If you feel a very strong emotional reaction, your only goal is to go there and show up. Show up, that's it. Techniques to be effective, to connect with people that you might have read in books, on LinkedIn, or heard about. Those are techniques that are meant to be used only once you're quite comfortable already. And it's the case for public speaking, for networking. Many people, they're blocked because they try to apply techniques before they even emotionally comfortable. The only way to get emotionally comfortable in a new situation in which you feel a strong emotional response is exposure. And anything else that you add on top of exposure might well backfire. So once you're a bit more comfortable, the key is to focus on other people. And that's also similar in networking and in a public speaking setting. We have a tendency of seeing the spotlight on us, but we need to put the spotlight on other people. Be curious about them. What would they like to know or to hear if we are talking to a crowd? Or if it's a networking event, how can I help them? How can I understand who they are? How can I find what's really beautiful in this person? It's all about the others.
This can be very uncomfortable. I might well be a bit anxious. Am I taking a risk? Am I stepping into that place where maybe they don't want to listen to me? Maybe they don't like me.
In which setting? In a networking setting?
Let's talk a social setting here.
Oh, you mean you might not feel comfortable to ask questions, like deeper questions about the other person?
Maybe.
Oh, they love it. Oh, then it's really something that you should try. But what I found is that when it's genuine curiosity, if it's genuine curiosity, people love it. Everyone wants to talk about what's on their mind, but everyone is having a kind of a social networking professional mask in those situations. And they want you to break it because you see it when you start to talk about what they find meaningful, what's their passions, what's their values. Usually people light up. So it really works. But if you feel not very comfortable to do it the first time, that's perfectly normal because the first time is always the time where you have to break barriers. The first time you do something new is always the hardest thing of all. But it's also why it's so important to do things that you feel discomfort to do, because that's how you grow confidence. That's how you create more possibilities, more opportunities in life. So here, the only advice would be just try once. And if you feel discomfort, it means you're growing.
Tell us a story. Tell us an example from your own experience of how this has played out.
The first time I discovered what I call and what other people that I met at networking events who are a bit of a similar experience called the extrovert switch. When you go to networking event and you talk to people who are extremely open, talking to everyone, it happens a lot that they tell you that they're used to be the most extreme type of introvert. A few years ago, I was traveling in Taiwan. I was backpacking in Asia. I was a digital nomad at that time. And I went to an hotel in which there was a big table in the main room, big table with people around. One of the reasons I started to backpack and be a digital nomad was because I wanted to overcome an extreme shyness and inability to connect and awkwardness. And I thought it was because I was a tech guy, you know. How can I possibly connect with normal people if I'm 100% into tech, building softwares all day? Was a PHP at that time. But then it hit me. You know, I started to feel this discomfort of, oh, but I'm shy, but I don't think I can do it. And I realized that people here, they don't know I'm shy. So I might as well pretend I am not shy. And I've set the challenge of talking to everyone in the room without exception. So I talked to the first person. Of course, it was hard. I didn't want to do it. I had to push myself. By the way, a little tip, if you try to find or wait for the perfect first sentence to talk to someone, just use hey. Works all the time. Don't overthink it. Hey, and then you see what's going on. So I talked to the first person. Okay, I felt a bit weird. Then I initiate a conversation with a second person. Still hard. And then a third. And that's when I started to feel open. I started to feel more joy. I started to feel comfortable, confident, and I wanted to talk to everyone. And I repeated this over and over and over. When I go to a new environment in which I'm not very comfortable because I don't have any experience in it, people might be not the type of people I usually talk. I still face the first one or two people I talk to an obstacle. But then when I reach the third one, I open up. And then I want to talk to everyone. And then I don't have to force it anymore. And it's all nice and joy and openness. And there are many people out there what's the same. Many people who used to identify as introverts who discovered that the secret is in initiating conversations. You initiate with 1, 2, 3, and then suddenly you want to talk to everyone. The extrovert switch.
A lot of our communication today is exactly like you and I are here, moderated through a video technology where we don't see the whole person. We might see a bank of names. Sometimes we're not even with cameras. How do I create connections in that space?
The camera reduces the dimensionality of the meeting. You lose many things. One way to compensate is to talk with a bit more energy and expressiveness than what you would do without a camera. What I recommend people to do is to, at least at the beginning, the first 30 seconds to 1 minute, talk with more energy. Talk a bit louder with more expressivity. You can even move your body and look at the center of the camera. This one is very important. If you have a secondary screen and you're not looking at the person when you speak, you fail to create the connection. You don't necessarily have to do that at all time, this more energy and this looking at the center of the camera. But for the first half minute, first 1 minute, it's extremely important. It can really change the relation that you have with the other person. And then you might keep the same energy because it makes you feel good, or you might lower it, but that's your call.
What if we haven't got the camera? Person I'm talking to, for one or other reason, is behind that box with a name on it.
Yeah. So you can't force the other person to put their camera on. What I usually recommend to do is to try to make them open it. You can ask a question like, hey, when I do those presentations, I use visual feedback to really adapt what I say to the people who are here. So it means that if you put your camera on, you will have a better experience. But of course, if you really can't, I understand. So you tell them that it would be great that they put the camera for their benefit and not for you. But you still leave them a door so that if they really don't want to do it, they don't feel forced to do it. I think this is the best you can do.
Geoffrey, merci beaucoup.
Merci, Shane.
A lot of good concrete advice in there. If people want to continue the conversation, where do they find you?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn. I post tips about public speaking almost every day.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.